Hello everyone and welcome to Stepmum Space Listener Questions. I love hearing from you, and while I can't always reply to every question in detail, each week I'll be taking one listener question and we'll be exploring it here, sharing not just my perspective but yours as well. If you'd like to contribute to future listener questions, please make sure you're following at Stepmum Space on Instagram or TikTok and keep an eye on my stories. Today's question is one of those that sounds practical and fairly simple on the surface, but in stepfamily life, it quickly becomes clear that the real issue isn't quite what it seems. Before we go any further, just to say, all the questions and responses I'll share are anonymised. Names have been changed, but the words and perspectives are real. So this week's question came from Abby, and she said, "My stepkids are 12, 14 and 17. They're with us nearly 50-50 and they want keys to our house. We've only been blended for a year and I feel weird about it. What should I do?" From my perspective, that word weird is carrying a lot of meaning here. It's so common for stepmums to notice a reaction in their body before they can explain it in words. Something tightens, something feels off. It's not over panic and it's not calm either. And situations like this can be surprisingly hard to talk about. Outside of stepfamily life, they often sound small or straightforward, but within a stepfamily system, they are rarely small. A lot of women I work with end up turning that feeling inward, telling themselves they are being awkward, controlling, or overthinking, when actually what they're responding to is the complexity of the system they're living in. In stepfamilies, things that are neutral in first families often carry emotional weight, and it's really important that we recognise that. A key isn't just a key. In stepfamilies, very few things are quite what they first seem. Because really, the weird feeling Abby's mentioning isn't about keys. It's about access, it's about boundaries, it's about belonging, and yes, it's about trust. Trust in the children, trust in the wider family system, and sometimes trust in how the other household will hold or not hold boundaries, and in this case, keys. That sense of trust or lack of it usually isn't a reflection of you. It's built from what you've already lived through in this family so far. When I shared this on my stories, the range of responses really shows how context dependent this is. And before we get into it, I just want to say there is no right or wrong here. There's one school of thought which says, well, this is completely normal. Jenny said, they're teenagers. It's perfectly normal for them to have a key to their dad's house rather than knocking like guests. Most teenagers have keys. I would gently question why that makes her feel uncomfortable. Karis added, it's their home too. They're old enough to respect the space. If you'd give biological children keys at that age, then stepkids should be exactly the same. And for some families, that is absolutely true. But other stepmums had a very different take on it. Maya said, I wouldn't give keys. My younger stepkids don't even have our garage code because I know the older one would hand it straight over to their mum and the younger one wouldn't be able to say no. She went on to say, I don't think their mum would misuse it, but I don't need her thinking the kids can come by the house when we're not home. There's no reason they need access during mum's custody time. And of course, the age of the kids is relevant here. For Maya, it's not about mistrusting the kids. It's about her concerns with their mum and keeping her home contained. Molly agreed. She said, if my stepkids had keys, they would be here every day having forgotten something. I don't need them tearing through the house all the time. They and their mum need to be a bit more organised. Safety came up a lot in responses like this. Lois told me, precious items of mine, as well as my makeup, have gone missing on weekends when my stepdaughter has been with us. I'm not prepared for her to have access to my home until I can be sure she wants it for the right reasons. This isn't an isolated experience, and it makes complete sense that safety would matter here, so I totally understand why Lois would want to remove the likelihood of that happening. Aisha added, it really depends on the age and the ex situation. In my case, the ex would absolutely con the kids into copying the key or turning up uninvited. But she also said, at the same time, it's important the kids feel like they belong and are welcome at any time. And really, that's the tension, isn't it? The wish for your stepkids to feel completely at home, alongside a very human need for your space to feel secure and yours. When those needs jar with each other, it's not wrong, it's just where stepfamily life gets complex. Belonging is a theme which always comes up in step families, and it matters for everyone. Louise shared something important. I'm also a bio mum, and I've seen how it affected my kids when they weren't allowed keys to their dad's house. It changed how welcome they felt there. And some stepmums landed in the middle on this one. Priya said, I don't like the idea of keys, maybe a key safe. They open the door and then immediately put it back. Hannah shared how they handled this situation. My stepkids had keys at those ages, but they still messaged when they're on the way, or we use a Ring doorbell so it doesn't feel intrusive. For some women, these options are a really good compromise, and some structure around it makes it feel manageable. Sophie put it like this. First, I'd question why it feels weird. Then I'd look at whether keys are actually needed, and then talk it through with my partner. Are the kids responsible? What boundaries would apply? And then finally, I'd include the kids in the conversation. Thank you for that, Sophie, and that sequencing really matters. What she's saying is to explore the origin of your weird feelings without judging yourself for having them, and then with a bit more clarity around where your feelings come from, discuss it with your partner and align on the best way to handle it. Then, when you're on the same page, discuss it with the children, not before and not separately. Reflecting on all of those responses, what really stood out to me wasn't what people decided, it was why. Every answer made sense in its own context. The kids' ages, the co-parenting dynamic, how settled the household feels, and yes, the level of trust that's been built so far. Feeling, quote, weird a year into blending doesn't mean you're rejecting the kids. It usually means your nervous system is still assessing safety. And that safety isn't just about the children. It's about trust in the wider system, including whether boundaries will be respected, whether access will stay contained, and whether you'll be backed by your partner if something doesn't sit right. So rather than asking, should I trust them? A more useful question is often, what specifically would help me feel safer and more settled here? And what's missing right now? For some stepmums, that answer is time. For others, it's clearer boundaries, and for some, it's practical safeguards. And for others, it's recognising that trust hasn't earned its way in yet, and that's not a failure. A few things I want to leave you with. This can be about trust, and it doesn't make you cold or suspicious. Trust in stepfamilies is built through consistency and repair, not pressure to look, quote, normal. You're allowed to need your home to feel contained before it feels open. And not yet is a valid boundary, not a rejection. This is a conversation to have with your partner, not something you should carry alone or quietly override yourself on. You're not wrong if you say yes, you're not wrong if you say no, and you're definitely not wrong if you say not yet. Stepfamilies don't need to rush to look normal. They need to feel safe for everyone in them. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode and found something helpful in there. If you've got a question you'd like me to explore in a future episode, you can submit it via the socials or by emailing katie@stepmumspace.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.